Good afternoon and welcome all. It's great to have such a passionate group of customer service leaders joining us for the webinar today. And for those of you who are not listening live, you've been lucky enough to receive a recording of the webinar. So yes, the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants. What was once a passing buzz phrase, voice of customer, is now front of mind for all customer service, experience and operations leaders. And this time, it's here to stay. As experience overtakes price and product as a key brand differentiator, the race is on to understand your customer better and deliver the ultimate experience. But how do we capture, sort, and display customer data? What are the pros and cons of data democratization? And how can you build voice of customer analytics and effectively close the feedback loop? This topic will be a key discussion at the 9th Annual Customer Service Summit in New York on October 23rd and 24th. This is an audio-only webinar, so check out the webinar chat box for a link to more information as you listen to the webinar. But for now, I'd like to introduce our panel of speakers. David Kocher, Vice President of Customer Success at GE Digital. Melanie Jamison, Vice President Client Success at Allied Telecom Group, Trista Miller, Director Customer Care at Frontier Airlines, and last but not least, I'd like to introduce Diane Magers, a good friend of the Insight Group, former CEO of CXPA, and our moderator for today's webinar. I'll hand it over to Diane from here, and thank you all. I look forward to a great discussion.
Thank you, Jasmine. It was wonderful, and it's a pleasure to be here today. We're going to have a quick poll for the audience on the biggest priorities you see for 2019 and 2020. Jasmine, if you're able, can you put the poll up for our audience, please? All right, it looks like the poll will be coming to you shortly, so keep an eye out for that. I wanted to welcome all the panelists. We've had a preview and discussion before this, and I think you're in for a very lively conversation with some very much how do I do that types of conversations. I know a lot of webinars that we all attend have great theory, but tell me exactly how you did it. So this group is extremely passionate about caring for customers and have some wonderful ideas that they're going to share with you. So I'm going to pose the question about the biggest priority for 2019 and 2020 to our panel. And David, I'd like to start with you. We'll just go in order. Which of these four things would you say is first on your list, and why?
Yeah, all four very important ones could certainly be priorities. I think I'm going to look towards the effective closeout of the feedback loop as the one that I would pick as the highest priority. And for me, that is where the rubber meets the road. When you collect information from customers, whether directly or indirectly, it's how we use that information to resolve their feedback, whether positive or negative, that makes the biggest difference, in my opinion. And so I think that last one, effectively closing the feedback loop and making sure we do outreach and engage with our customers when they do reach out and tap us, is one of the most critical priorities for the year.
Yes, and very personal. It kind of brings your brand to life a little bit. How about you, Melanie? Which of those resonates with you for your priorities?
Yeah, for us, because we are just beginning our journey, they're all extremely important. But the data democratization and internal data sharing and building that voice of the customer for us is huge. We're in the process of building out our customer advisory board, which is one way that we are going to use to actually bring that voice of customer in, and then making sure that we share our data throughout the entire company, and that everybody in the company is on the same page is our biggest priorities.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Okay, so how about you, Trista? Which one of these resonates?
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, I echo the other two in saying that they're all important, but I think for us in our life cycle right now, the data democratization is super top of mind for us. We are working to get information out across the company. I think in the past, perhaps customer care organizations had a lot of good information, but didn't really have a great way to get it out there, or it was siloed in that it was only the piece of information that related to customer care, and some of those other operational data pieces weren't available. So for us, working with our business intelligence team to be able to stitch together the customer care data that we have along with other operational pieces of data to kind of create a complete picture and then share that back out across the company is a key priority for us. And one of the things that we're seeing now is that as we share that, people want more. And so we're kind of in this place where we've given folks a taste of what we can offer, and now there's not necessarily a tidal wave, but it feels like it may get there soon. There's a surge of requests to get more information out. So that's exciting that there's momentum building around that.
That's really great, because I think one of the frustrating part of being in a leadership position, even if you're in care or really CX, Chief Experience Officer, anything that involves this, is creating that kind of build it and they will come. We kind of have to push it out and go to the organization and have them, really chew on it and begin to ask more questions, because that drives that engagement. Trista, that's a great example of how you've been able to pull that in. So for the audience, you can hear that everybody's at a certain stage in their journey and they're doing different things. So the benefit of this and having everybody on the team is there are people who are just getting started and going to talk about their roadblocks, and also are going to share with you kind of how they overcome those roadblocks. So it looks like here's the poll came up. So let's get the audience now to weigh in on what they think is most important, because this will help drive our piece. So if you haven't already, go ahead and continue that poll, and let's see where people are. Yeah, using data to personalize. Personalization is huge. Yeah. Okay, great results. Using customer data in so many different ways, and we'll talk a little bit about personalization and how that shows up in these organizations, very dynamic organizations. So hang on to your questions, and we're going to, at the end, have you drill down into some of the answers from the panelists. So let's get started. I want to kind of start with, great, it's about using data, using analytics to drive action at your brand. So many organizations kind of get stuck with, we did all this analysis, we got some interesting results, they put it in a PowerPoint, make a presentation, and it sits on the shelf. What's the one thing that you all are most proud of related to using analytics to drive actions at your brand? And Trista, I'm going to start with you. If you would share that, what you're doing, and then if you could talk briefly about the tangible and intangible results that created. Trista, you want to share with us some story?
Yeah, great. So one of the things we've been able to do this year, as I kind of touched on it earlier, is that we're bringing together a lot of different data sources and then working with a bunch of different teams across the organization to share that feedback and talk about kind of what's within their sphere of control that might help improve the customer experience. And to that end, we saw that in the call centers, we were getting a lot of calls from people about how to modify their reservations. We're an airline, so people want to modify their booking. Makes sense, except that we really push self-service, and our website is very functional and allows customers to take care of that. So we couldn't quite understand why we were getting so many calls. So through some of our analytics, we discovered that there's a lot of feedback from them about not being able to find on our website how to make that modification. So we partnered with our website team, and they were able to make a very simple change on our homepage, which added some more clear language about where you would go to modify your booking. And we made that change in partnership with them, and kind of that tangible value to our organization is that we've seen calls to the contact center decrease in that bucket significantly. So there's a real cost savings there that customers are now better able to self-serve. And the intangible, I'd say, is the improved customer experience, that likely these folks were looking on the website, trying to take care of themselves when they couldn't find it, having to call in to take care of it, and now they don't have to do that. So that's been a real win on both the cost side and the experience side.
I love that you marry those two, because I think it's something we tell the story sometimes, but we don't tell both that human impact story along with that business case, like the dollars related to the reduction in calls that you had, and efficiency of your center, and all those other things that we just forget to tell. So I love that you're combining those two things. Melanie, do you want to share? You're just kind of starting out. So how have you begun, or how are you thinking about driving actions from your data? What do you see as the opportunities?
Yeah, so one of the big things I did as soon as we made the decision to have this group, this experience, was to implement a new survey tool. And that survey tool, when we looked at everything out there, and there's so many different ones, we decided, based on feedback from our customers, that they wanted something that was simple. They didn't want to spend 10 minutes answering a survey. They wanted a quick, here it is and I'm done. So we implemented the new survey tool. It's got 2 questions on it, and we have received a ton of feedback, both positive and negative. What we did is we created dashboards for all of the departments across the company, so that each person gets notified as these surveys are coming in, both positive and negative. And we've been able to make customer evangelists out of our positive surveys, but we've been able to actually enact process changes on the back end to help alleviate some of these negative surveys. And we've seen those negative surveys decrease substantially just in the 3 months that we've been doing it. So our customers experience, the positive experiences, we ran with that, and it just makes that so much better for the customer. And the negative, we've been able to fix the problem. So we've got happier customers. That experience overall is better.
I love that affirmative approach to what you're doing. Like, we spend so much time trying to find problems and fix them, and really making those evangelists and thanking those customers for being a part of our brand and being part of our organization is important. And I also love the internal piece that you did, and really getting this buy-in. A lot of people talk about changing the culture. It sounds like that's one of the activities that has really had an impact on how you've begun to shift that thinking.
Absolutely.
David, you had some great examples. Do you want to share some with the team about how you're driving action at your brand and what value you created?
Yeah, absolutely happy to. And over the last 5 years, we've instituted an account health tracking mechanism. And I emphasize 5 years because this has been a significant journey. But in essence, what we've done is identified different critical areas for accounts and customers throughout the journey. And the 5 categories are around their commercial health, their project health, their support health, their adoption health, and the health of the product that they're using. And we've got 30 plus indicators, part of which is our transactional survey tool that brings in real-time insight sentiment from survey feedback, but then also operational data about that customer that informs this health score that allows us to know when we have customers that are trending outside of what we would consider the norms and pushes them into a green to yellow to red sort of a status. What the account health tracking system has allowed us to do is gain greater visibility into where our problems accounts are, move from reactive to more proactive engagement with them around those things that we're seeing trending the wrong direction. And the benefit is we've seen a significant reduction in the overall health of portfolio scores, so more greens and fewer red accounts. And that's definitely supported for us financially, the ability to retain and renew subscription contracts with our customers in the order of millions of dollars and identify new business, new opportunities or leads through that process in the order of millions of dollars as well.
That's a pretty big impact to the organization. Was it quite a bit of effort to get to that health score? How did you create that with the rest of the group, and is there other organizations or parts of the organization? How did you approach that? Was it a concept you had to kind of sell, or did you build it and same as we said, build it and we'll get people on board?
Yes, to a little bit of both. Some of what I often find is most useful is creating a concept or an example that we're able to show success with, and get people to tweak and tune the model versus try and come up with their own model. So we set out and created an initial foundational set of inputs, and over time have continued to evolve and tune and tweak those metrics so more and more people in the organization can buy into when they see that an account turns red, they agree and say, yep, we all can stop what we're doing and focus on that.
That is wonderful. Okay, thank you for that great example. That's a really tactical, great way that you can see these folks are doing a lot of great work and really pushing the envelope in what they're doing. So when you share information across the organization, one of the challenges that many practitioners run into is managing or coordinating those activities, right? So it's one thing to give them information and say, go. How do you make sure that you're orchestrating that information? Melanie, I'll start with you. How have you addressed that challenge?
So because we are a relatively small company, it's easy for me to get everybody in a room. So we have what we call our full potential meeting every week, and it brings in all of the leaders from the different departments where we actually sit and go through all of the challenges, what's happening, what do we need to fix, how do we need to change. But it's just getting everybody in the same room. And like I said, because we're smaller, that's easier for a company my size than it would be a larger company. And then the other thing that we do is we make sure that we use our CRM to track all of our activities, to follow them through, to make sure that things are completed and everybody has access to it. So it's again, it's sharing and making everybody accountable for their portion and documenting it.
Terrific. David, would you like to share a little bit of how you manage and herd the cats, so to speak?
Yeah, I'll go back to actually one of the priorities that was in the poll, the data democratization. I think that is certainly one of the ways that we've seen to help support coordination, orchestration across different silos, but making the account health metrics, the visibility into the scores of our different accounts available in real time for the entire organization to see gives us all a transparent understanding of where we are. In addition to that, we'll send out a weekly summary to the organization of the top critical accounts and a summary of what are the biggest issues, what are the needs, and who needs to help fix or resolve that problem, what's the gap. And then monthly, we do a review with our CEO and the senior leadership team, the CTO and Chief Commercial Officer and so on, to review those top accounts or any of those roadblocks that are hurdles that have not been removed. So I think the democratization of the data, push notifications that'll tell people when there's a problem, and then getting people in the room to solve things when it's not happening has helped us.
Those are fantastic. Trista, your turn. How have you managed that information and coordinated those activities?
So certainly I agree with David that sharing the information is critical. I think it takes kind of a multi-pronged approach. We've worked a lot with our business intelligence group to get the information into one place, which I think is the first step for us, because each silo kind of has its own data that it cares about, but it's sometimes tough to get context when all you can see is your own information. So that was the first piece for us. I think the second piece is looking at it at two different levels. Gaining executive buy-in and trying to get momentum around this idea of customer experience and its importance to the company is critical, and we share information about the customer experience and how it's changing or where those pain points are on a regular basis. But I think the second piece is our analysts in customer experience working with folks kind of at that same level in the different silos within the organization to create this kind of organic movement within the company. So you're kind of attacking that idea of customer experience from both sides, and getting that traction. And we've done that primarily through, in terms of kind of a how-to, we're really using Power BI quite a bit, which is the Microsoft product, to build out dashboards. So, at the executive level, maybe we're turning that into a PowerPoint and sharing change over time, or the new thing that's up and coming over from the last time we met. But on the other side, we're creating these dashboards that are dynamic, and I've really challenged my team to say that an analyst in another part of the business should be able to, within 3 clicks, get to information that would allow them to drive change in their piece of the business. And so that's what we've been doing.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful. You talked a lot. I'm going to throw a little curveball at you here. We talked a lot about in the original, 4 categories in VoC and closing the loop. But it seems like the audience is looking for personalization. Can you briefly, each of you, touch on personalization and how that has been enabled in your organization? So Melanie, do you want to start?
So yeah, personalizing each customer's experience for us, we're not there yet. We are looking at some different software which will allow us to bring in more information about each customer to personalize that experience for each individual customer, but we're just not there yet.
And that is where a lot of people are. So it's good to know you're not crazy and you're not alone. How about you, David?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, with it being a B2B, us being a B2B organization and software, we typically end up in many times larger interactions with customers, and the people that are involved allow us to do more of the personalization, and we don't have to rely as much on automation and digital outreach to do so. So I would say from a personal interaction perspective, we've developed a governance model that allows us to identify who's the executive, strategic, operational, and tactical people involved in that particular engagement with that particular customer, and define the interactions that are going to happen, and when they don't happen, what the escalation path is. That allows us on a one-to-one personal face-to-face level begin to personalize the interactions. On the technology side, we are still working, just like, as it sounds like many others on the phone, to try and figure out ways to do that through our online customer portal or through our automated outreach emails and campaigns. Still work to do.
It's a consistent theme for what we do for a living. There's always a lot of work to do. A lot of customers that are doing that. Anything else, Trista, you want to share?
Sure. So I think everybody's right. We can never rest on our laurels, not because we think that we've checked all the boxes, but I think as soon as we say, wow, we've gotten where we think our customers want us to go, they push us to the next level. You think about some of these worldwide companies and how personalized their experience is, and yet customers are demanding to get things, faster, sooner. I want my pizza delivered to me on the beach. So our work is never done. I would say in our space, things that we've been able to do to personalize, I think our email communication is really important leading up to someone's trip. So we personalize and help create things that are beneficial for the company in terms of potential revenue, but also we know in terms of the customer experience. For example, with your bags, if you have a carry-on bag, we charge for our carry-on bags. So, and we know that it's more expensive when you get to the airport, so we're going to tell you that ahead of time if you don't have one of those. So we've done things like that. We also, in the last year, we've created a new online portal that allows you to do a bit of some gamification to help customers feel like they have a personalized experience and make it fun, where they can track. We have animals on the tails of our planes, so they can collect all the different tails in their online portal, which creates, I think, some fun and some personalization as they interact with our company.
Those are wonderful examples of how you've personalized it, from everything from a B2B, where you're looking at how can we help the team, reach out to that customer differently or optimize those touch points and really have that relationship personally, but then using data to talk about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then driving this engagement behavior like the tail story. Really interesting in how you do that. So if I think about the organizations, there's a lot that we can do, but all of us run into obstacles, and I think it's always important to talk more about what are the obstacles and how do you overcome them, and what you need in order to be successful. So I'll start with you, Trista. I'm going to ask the question: what do you want, or what would you like your organization to do differently?
Well, the number one answer is I want everyone to be as passionate about the customer as I am, and short of that, and or a blank check to get whatever tools and technology I need to make that happen. I think I wish we could move faster. I think there's, across our company, there's a lot of competing priorities, and I want us to move more quickly than I think we can move, given that I'm not the only department that's buying for resources. So I definitely like to see that done differently. I also want to continue to see engagement. I think Melanie's mentioned that she's kind of at the beginning of her CX journey, and David's certainly much farther down the path than we are. I'd say we're somewhere in the middle, and so listening to David talk about some of the things that they've done gets me really excited about the future of where we're heading. I'd love to be able to close the feedback loop in our post-flight survey, and get back to my most valuable customers, at a minimum, and eventually everybody. But for now, I think continuing to build the momentum, and then if we could just move faster, that would be the key for me.
That sounds really easy, because the world is changing around us so quickly. It's hard for organizations to keep up that pace.
Yep.
Melanie, do you want to share? What would you like the organization to do differently?
Yeah, I have to follow Trista, and that unlimited budget would be just amazing. But the same for me. I would love for us to be able to move faster to get things done. I would also love for the entire organization to understand the customer experience. So those are definitely things that we're working on. Again, I'm listening to David and where he's at, and I'm looking so forward to where our company can be. But I have to remember that we have to take it in small bites. Do a little bit at a time, get it done well, and then move on to the next one. So move faster, but do it very, very well.
Yeah, the best of all worlds there. David, how about you? Are you going to jump on the bandwagon here?
I certainly won't say no to unlimited budget. So if anybody has checks they're writing, I'm accepting. I think I'm going to go back to the previous question a little bit to say where I think I'd like things to be different. You were talking about coordinating and orchestrating across the organization, and for me that comes down to process control, creating single places where customers or employees can take care of the things that they need, a single stream for an issue, or a single success plan associated with an account that contains all the issues that are being solved. A single executive sponsor, all of these things around process control allow us to not have things slip through the crack. And what I find is when we go outside of the process, or something happens via an email exchange or a text that's between two employees, we lose visibility to the data and the information. It doesn't come through the process that allows us to share it and see what's going on, escalate it, and close it down. So I would say process and following the process that are defined so that we don't have things slip through the crack and those exceptions go away.
Oh, that's a great wish. I love that. Wonderful topics there. I think it's always, to say we want to move faster and how we do that. So it's one thing to identify the problem before we get to how are we going to help the organization do that. But from the examples you've given, you all are helping your brands to really move forward. So how do all the things you talked about impact your organization? I know that we talked a little bit about culture change. We talked about some financial things, but what do you feel like is your biggest impact that you're having today? Melanie, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest impact, again, because our group is relatively new and there's such a renewed focus on the customer experience, the biggest impact for us has been educating everybody within the company on exactly what their role does and how it impacts the customer. Because so many people don't realize that what they're doing behind the scenes actually impacts that customer's experience along the way. So just educating and making everybody aware and turning them into the customer evangelists that the client success team is for Allied has been a huge culture shift for us, and it's been a very good one, both financially and culturally for our company.
Wonderful. How about you, Melanie?
No.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, lost the name. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, absolutely. I think impacts in both ways. Culturally, I would look at data democratization and the visibility and the insights, bringing transparency to the organization, allowing us to have candid conversations about what's really going on. There can be a sense of fear and trepidation about sharing the information broadly, about what conversations come up when people see things that are negative or not positive. But I think that's really important for a culture to have that transparency, and then the ability to have the conflict in a constructive manner that comes from being candid with each other about where we have issues or problems and where we need them to be fixed. And I think that allows us to get to a customer first mentality. Because if we're not talking about what the problems are, or we're not aware of what the problems are that our customers are facing, we can't put them first. So it can move from a slogan or a motto or something you put on a billboard to reality when we know what's going on and we're talking about it with each other. So I think that's really important on the cultural side. Financially, I alluded earlier to some of the impacts, the visibility into account health and the process we put around remediating issues associated with account health have financially. So there are benefits, big ones, when we get this right.
That's wonderful. It's a great way to say it. Trista?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've noticed over the last, the last few months or year, is that the more we get momentum around thinking about the customer experience, I think we're starting to, as a company, realize that our employee experience is as, if not more important, as the customer experience. So there's been a lot of talk and movement towards engaging our employees in a significant way, because without engaged employees, it's tough to have great customer experiences. So I'd say culturally, that's a shift that I'm seeing happen as we continue to put customer first. We're kind of thinking employee first as well, which is exciting to me. And then I think financially, I touched on earlier some of the hard costs that we've seen decrease as we're able to bring data to light around how to improve the experience for the customer. But I think other financial benefits are, as we make the experience better, do our customers travel with us more? And are they happier about it, which means they're spreading word of mouth, or that they're using word of mouth to spread our brand, which means we're going to get more travelers. And so those are some of the things that haven't quite figured out how to quantify yet, but I think financially there's there's benefit on the cost reduction side, but I think there's also the potential for revenue growth as well.
That's wonderful. Those are some really, really great examples. So we're a little past the top of the hour, and we want to leave some time for the audience to ask questions, which will facilitate. So those of you on listening, give us some questions to react to. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that you'll be able to find on the when the event itself, and we've sent the link to you in the chat. So let us know if there's anything there. But I think there's a lot more that can be had. But be thinking about those questions. So I'm going to turn a little bit to the future because I think this could be part of where people always kind of land. So what's on the roadmap for 2020, and why are you focused in that particular area? David, can you start?
Certainly, one of the things we want to work on as we get into the end of 2019 and 2020 is to create a better outcomes tracking mechanism to be able to substantiate, validate the value that's being delivered to customers as a result of using our product. And this for us brings together the selling motion and the delivering motion, and then the customer value gaining motion. As our sales team interacts with customers and they're doing estimates on what the potential opportunities are from benefit gain by using our software in the industrial space to improve efficiency or to support better uptime, or to hit one of their key KPIs that they may be measured on in their organization, that we're able to pull that through the delivery cycle as we implement software, refine and tweak it, and then into the post-go live cycle where we can verify and validate in conjunction and partnership with the customer that those things are actually being delivered, and that if we're not, we're able to put in plans to figure out how we get to the value that's desired or needed. And that continues to allow us to iterate or evolve on what we're working on together.
Great examples, great examples. Melanie, you've got a lot in front of you, so there's probably a long laundry list for you, but what are you focused on the most? What's most important on that list?
Yeah, so I've got basically 3 things on my list, 4 as I end 2019 and go into 2020. You know, we want to continue to develop the actual client success team that we created. We're going to continue to work to break down the silos to make sure that everybody within our company is marching towards the same outcome. And obviously the client advisory board that we're in the process of putting together. So that is going to be huge for us. And hopefully in October at the summit, I'll be able to tell you how that's coming and what's going on with it. But the big piece of software, I really want to get more into the analytics and take the human out of it. You know, so I'm looking at customer sentiment analytics, just ways for us to understand what's happening with our customers without them having to actually tell us. So I've got a lot on my plate. I'm looking forward to it. I've got a great team, and I think 2020 is going to show big things for us.
So great to hear. You sound so optimistic. I love to hear that passion in your voice. Trista, you've got a lot of things going on. So there's probably a place or two you'd like to really see come into play. What would that be?
Yeah, I think as we continue to, number one for me is continue to share the information across the organization and get folks bought in on this idea that improving the customer experience or the pain points within their sphere of influence is paramount to the company's success. I think the other thing that's important is continuing down that path of personalization, starting to understand who this customer is so that when they communicate with our brand, we communicate with them in a way that reflects their importance to us, and ensuring that, you know, I think people want to have a personalized experience, and not all customers can or should be treated equally depending on the scenario. And so continuing to tackle that and get ahead of ensuring that our best customers feel the love from Frontier is important to me next year.
That's great. I think it's wonderful. I am looking forward to hearing when the event rolls around how you put those plans in place and what you're executing on. So before we open it up for questions, just one last thing, and I love to do this because it makes us think about where we were when we first started. what is the one thing you would say to a new person starting this work? And when I mean this work, it's how do you go from being a care center to an experience center and really driving that change in the organization? Trista, do you want to start?
No problem. The most important thing is start small. It's not, this is a journey that, you know, I think there's a saying, a journey begins with a journey of 1,000 steps begins with a single one, and the same is true here. Start small, look for the quick wins, find a group within your organization who has an appetite to partner with you on fixing pain points that they have control over, and create some quick wins in your company. That's going to give you, I think, some momentum, and should also then create some success stories that you can share more broadly, which should then continue that snowball of momentum for you. So start small, find somebody who's excited about the change with you, just one other department, and then partner with them like crazy to create some small wins, which will then build momentum and allow you to keep growing your vision.
Awesome advice, because it can be a little overwhelming when you start to see where a lot of things I could go do. What should I focus on? Melanie?
Yeah, so I agree with Trista. You know, it can become very overwhelming very quickly. So it's definitely start small. For me, it's, you know, make sure you have executive buy-in, that you have your leadership team on board, and that they understand what customer experience is, that it's not just this little fuzzy buzzword, that, you know, you have a clear understanding from the top of what you want your customer's experience to be with your company, and then take that and build it down to small, quick wins, as Trista said.
Yeah, taking it one step at a time. David?
I would say surround yourself with amazing people. I would say whether you're hiring them directly or they're the other folks that are in your organization, find those people you can rely on to do great work, that can push or challenge your thinking or bring in new ideas and concepts. I have to give a shout out to my team. If anybody of them are on the call, and I hope they are, that they're awesome, top notch, and none of anything I talked about today is possible without them. So I want to thank them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, it takes a village. It takes a village. All right, so we have, thank you all so much for that input, and this is where we get to think about things outside of what we've discussed, and we've got questions that are coming from the audience. So let's just run over there and see what they have to say. So first question for you, David, it's about the track adoption health. Maybe there's some tips on how to increase that. So you're tracking it, but what are some of the actions you've taken when you've got somebody who's in the kind of yellow and red?
For sure. So one of the things we first of all did is made sure that there is a human associated with each of the accounts. Based on our segmentation of accounts, we do that at different ratios. It could be as low as a one-to-one relationship with one customer success manager associated with an account, up to as high as hundreds of accounts to a single individual. And what that allows us to do is to, one, review the information and see how things are trending, and then secondarily allows a human to interact and intercede if in fact it's a false positive and the data quality isn't awesome, which you all may experience this in your organization. I know I do. Data is not always as high quality as we'd like it to be. So a human can be there to control the data that's coming in real time and tune it when it needs to be tuned. And then thirdly, they can look at what the problem is and place our very capable brains against it to say, what's the right next steps, and coordinate across the organization to make sure that that gets done and closed out. And when I talked about closing the feedback loop in the beginning as one of the most important priorities, that's how I think about it, as how do we hear what the customer's pain is or could be and put in place an action plan to close it out so that it doesn't become a problem or the problem becomes resolved.
Thank you. That was a great answer. That really helps with the how, and we're going to go do. So we have another question from Judy Brown, and I think it's probably a little bit more complex, and maybe we just want to talk through a little bit of the systems. But it's, what VoC software or systems are you all utilizing? And I think there's probably a combination of enterprise feedback. Maybe there's a call center system. So I guess Judy's asking for what VoC platforms you all are using. Can you just quickly share, starting with Trista, which platform are you using?
No problem. We actually use SurveyMonkey to build our surveys, and then we use our email provider to attach the significant data pieces that we want to track and send those surveys out. And that's what we use for our VoC. And then in terms of the analytics, when we get the information back, I mentioned we're using Power BI as one of our primary analytics tools.
Got it. Melanie?
All right, we are actually using Ask Nicely as our survey tool. And at this point, that is the only tool that we're using for our VoC.
Perfect. David?
Yeah, a relatively involved tech stack for how we execute the system, but from a survey, voice of customer feedback, we utilize Qualtrics, and for our account health monitoring system, we use Gainsight.
Fantastic, thank you. I hope that helps Judy a little bit. There's a plethora of platforms out there, everything from very small to very large and integrated. And it sounds like there's usually a combination of things where you're bringing information in and you're putting it into another tool to do more analytics and merge other things together. So that's also one of those journey steps, and also sometimes complex in looking at what your organization can do. So a question for the speakers, and we'll kind of see who maybe has the most expertise in this area. This came from Randall, and he says, what role do you see digital identity holds in closing the feedback loop or understanding voice of customer? What is your organization doing to understand digital identities? Anybody who wants to answer Randall's question, if you can?
I think for me, with our installed base and customers, it is not quite as challenging because we're not dealing with such a broad audience. And typically when we're engaged with our customers, they're coming through our online customer portal, and they have a defined login, and it's associated with an account or contact inside of our Salesforce CRM. So we're able to make those connections. The same is true in our face-to-face interactions or direct email. So we don't run into as many places where we're getting anonymous interactions that it would be tough for us to identify, if I understood the question correctly.
Okay, we'll let that stand. Each of you are presenting. Let's talk a little bit about your topics. Each of you are a part of the conference coming up. What are you speaking on? David, can you share first?
Yeah, definitely going to touch more on the methodology associated with account health and some more of the nuance or details about how that's done and executed and what brings it to life. So definitely, if you're interested in that, please join in. Hope to see you there. And I'll just say what I'm hoping and looking forward to getting out of the attendance at the conference myself is to make sure that I'm leveraging all of the knowledge that so many of the B2C organizations and people that are going to be attending have about broad scale engagement and interaction with customers and creating experience for these types of brands that I can learn and glean from that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Melanie, how about you? What are you talking about?
It will be more along, the journey for me and how we've gotten to where we are, the things that we've been able to accomplish coming into this industry or this client experience revolution, and all the different pieces. So I'm very excited about being able to share, how we got started, things to do, things to avoid.
So you kind of already talked through that whole what should I do differently, and what would you tell a person when they're starting this work?
Absolutely.
Trista, how about you?
Yeah, I am going to be talking about touching more, I think, on the data democratization, kind of what are the pros of it, what are the cons of it, how it works, and then kind of looking at somewhat of a case study with what we're doing here and with our airports. We, from our corporate office and our customer experience group, we are compiling information for about over 100 airports that we interact with passengers in those airports, and so the Frontier representatives in those airports, and how we can make those airport experiences better, and then also personalizing the passenger experience by working with some of these other internal groups.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. We don't have any other questions that came up, and we're close to our time. So I'm excited to hear and see all of you at that event and hear some of these fantastic topics, and truly appreciate you sharing. Though sometimes it's hard to show the scars of what you've learned and what you've done, but also your enthusiasm and passion for building more experience into the brand. If I had to summarize, it sounds like data is only the start, and there's everything from making sure you have the data in the correct way, asking the right questions, to how the data gets leveraged, like in David's health score, to how you take the organization, the information to the organization and rally them around it to build change. And then this larger piece of really getting the organization to think and operate differently around the experience. So it's not work for the faint of heart, and I appreciate all that hard work and truly your sharing today. So Jasmine, we'll turn it back over to you for a wrap and a little bit more about the Insight Group and what's coming.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thank you to our audience for joining us today for the webinar. I think it's safe to say that utilizing customer data is key to delivering the ultimate customer experience and staying competitive as a business. The most successful brands are taking this data very seriously and going above and beyond to democratize data and close the feedback loop. If you're interested in hearing more strategies to exceed customer expectations in the experience economy, as we have mentioned throughout the webinar, we'll be discussing this and more at the 9th Annual Customer Service Summit in New York on October 23rd and 24th. I hope you can join us at the event, and thank you all for joining us for the webinar.